Hello, it's Wednesday, July 29th, 7:30 Central Time. My name is Jeff Willington, and I will be your host for vBrownbag US. We have Ariel Sanchez, who's going to be talking about VCP6-DCV Section 2. So he's going to fire this thing up for us, and we're gonna get educated tonight. Just a couple of quick notes this evening. This is my first time hosting, so I promise to not butcher this thing any more than normal. So just a couple of quick notes. Please follow us on Twitter at vBrownbag, Twitter hashtag vBrownbag. Throw some questions out for us. I'll be monitoring Twitter and keep an eye on that so that we can ask Ariel any questions you guys may have out there. Just kind of some other quick notes. Professionalvmware.com/brownbags. We have our APAC brown bag every other Thursday, 10 p.m. The EMEA professional VMware brown bag. I'm sure it's not on VCP and V series anymore. This slide's probably a little old, but it is on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. And so forth. So then we have our Latin American vBrownbag on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Pacific time. So with that, tonight our guest again is Ariel Sanchez. You can find him at Ariel Sanchez More on Twitter. My name again is Jeff Wilmington. You can find me at vWilmo. Hit us both up on Twitter. Ask us some questions. And right now, I'm going to swap this over to Ariel and have him take us on our trip.
All right. Let me see if I can get the right monitor.
Yeah.
And do you see a full PowerPoint?
I do see a full PowerPoint.
Excellent. All right, everybody. Welcome. First of all, thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Ariel Sanchez, or Ariel in Spanish. I got some certifications. Gladly, I haven't failed any of those exams yet, but here we are studying for VCP6, and I'm gonna take it slow. I actually got 2 sessions for this topic, so we're gonna take it, relatively slow on each one of them since we have some time. And the first thing I want to talk about is the changes in the VCP6 overall. And I know this is the second session. We already had a first session, but it is a bit tougher. It does have more topics than the VCP5 had, for example. The recommended classes have actually changed. And I had the VCP6 webpage up here. And you can see that you basically have, there's some options, but basically you can have 2 exams. And the exams actually, it used to be only the install, configure, manage course was needed for VCP, but they now also recommend the optimize and scale, which is something that they normally would tell you that's for the VCAP DCA. So expect a bit tougher exam. The blueprint is only available as a web page. You no longer have the advantage of saying, hey, I'm studying of the version 3 point whatever. It's basically whatever last web page there is there. Some people didn't like it. Some people started saying, well, I'm going to pull off the PDF and make my own PDF and stuff like that. But, this is what it is. Let's talk about our audience. If you don't have your VCP5, you need to do a foundations exam. This is not a proctor exam. I think it's only online. Then you have to do a VCP exam, and you have to make sure you got a class, at least one. It can be any class. They recommend those 2, so you can have at least 1 class. If you have a valid VCP5, then you just do the VCP6 exam, which starts officially this VM world. This is valid even if your VCP is not the data center virtualization track. For example, let's say you're coming from the networking world, you have a VCP and V, can go ahead and take the VCP6 exam without going to another class. And since I already mentioned there's 2 exams, there's quite, in this particular topic in networking, there's quite some overlap that we're going to see. And Brian Welch already covered the VCP6 Foundation networking topic right here. And I did put the PowerPoint in Twitter, so you can click on those links over there. The topic overlaps between Foundation and VCP6 are basically, you don't get to see again the standard switch configuration, but the VDS is about the same. There's some additions, and policies and features is exactly the same. So if you already studied the Foundation, the VCP6 policies and features is about the same thing. Some things that Objective 2.1 notably adds in the VCP6 exam is DV port group blocking, which is real easy. You're going to find out. TCP segmentation offload support in the virtual machine. So this is I think this is the first time that inside the networking theme we're going to actually go into the VM and talk about the options there. And how to enable jumbo frames on the appropriate components. Now, there is one distinctive topic that wasn't in the Foundation, and that's network I/O control. You get these 4 bullet points: identify requirements, capabilities, enable, disable, NIOC, and monitor. However, out of everything networking-wise in vSphere 6, the one thing that has changed the most is network I/O control. It is now at version 3, and before we could talk about shares, we could talk about limits. Now we can actually reserve bandwidth for a VM, for a port group, for a traffic class. And DRS can now actually take bandwidth into account. So if you set a reservation on a VM and DRS is detecting that this host cannot do that, but this other one can, it will actually move the VM. So that's something that hopefully I'll get to demo in the next one. This is the recommended material that they gave us. What I did was I left it with the links, and I put whatever was related to networking. So the installation setup guide, the only thing related to networking is basically configuring the host as soon as it boots, giving it an IP, mask, DNS, talking a little about the options to recover networking. The what's new is a really, really small section, and that only covers basically there's changes in NIOC, so it's only on page 17. vSphere physical NIC performance. This is nothing new for version 6 specifically, but it is a good read for 11 pages. It does talk to you about, okay, this is the options that you get basically in the VMXNet 3 adapter, and this is what you can do. Might not be that one, but it also talks about things in the physical hosts of the physical adapters of the host that help get more performance out of vSphere. vSphere 6 performance evaluation. This one dives deep into all the NIOC version 3 information, explains the changes, gives you some data. And finally, the networking guide, which is most of it is relevant to us. It is a definitive document that VMware gives you. It is it's quite extensive. I think it reaches maybe 200 pages or so, 230 something. And you can see, you know, they cover absolutely everything. They have some really nice graphs for some things, but sometimes it's a lot of just text. They don't really put a lot of pictures in there. So I'm going to recommend some other awesome material, right? So books. This is Chris Wall's Networking for VMware Administrators. It came out around version 5.5, but apart from NIOC, everything is valid. I love this book. If he were to update it right now, I will buy it again. It's a phenomenal book, especially for people that haven't had the privilege to go to like a Cisco class or, you know, really get good networking fundamentals. He really walks you through all the little things until you get to the VMware part, and he talks about the storage and this and that. It's a great book. Can't recommend it enough. And also, if you're studying for the VCP6, you probably already have the Mastering vSphere 6 by Marshall, Grant Orchard, Josh Atwell, etc. Great book as well. It's a classic ever since the 5.0 came out. So those two are great. If you click on this link, it'll actually take you to the authors page. So normally they get, you know, in their link, they get a little commission if you buy it from there. So go ahead and buy it from them. Also, blogs and social media. If you search Google for what you're studying, VCP6 Objective 2, the study guide, or even VCP-NV Objective 3, these are all things that we're going to review. And you can also check the vBrownbag for other videos. I'm not sure if the APAC or the EMEA have started a VCP6 series, but I know that in LATAM we already started it, and I actually did the LATAM one. Now, if you don't know Spanish, at least you can take a look at it, and you can see me playing with the lab, but it's going to be very similar to what we're going to do here today. Now, normally in vBrownbag, we really value that lab time. We want to see things, right? But the VCP6 exam is a multiple choice exam. So even though you really need to know where everything is, and you need to be really fast, I would say. This is part of being part of VCP is saying that you know how to do this in the flesh when you actually get a job. One thing we're going to do is we're going to really review the concept. Then we might do a lab, and we come back. But really, we have to review the concepts at this level. We're going to tackle Objective 2.1 today, and 2.2 and 2.3 we're going to do next week. Hopefully, what I'm planning is that I can actually get some more interesting demos out of it, because all of my lab, and I'll show it in a bit, all of my lab is just one desktop, and I've never been able to do something like LACP on my one desktop. So I'm trying to find out if maybe I can get the Arista EOS VM or something like that and be able to create a virtual LACP. So I'm still looking at that, but hopefully I have some interesting things next week.
Hey,
I
Ariel,
did ask, yes, go ahead.
if you want to do LACP and stuff like that next week, and you are having some issues with labs and so forth, let me know, because I'll be more if I'm hosting next week and I can arrange that. But let me know, because I don't have a problem with firing up my lab here, where you can go through it, because I have the ability to do things like that too. I have
Excellent. You have some switches and stuff?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Hey, even better. And you know why it's even better? Because I have absolutely no experience on EOS or any other of those. So it will be fun if we can create something that everybody can replicate. But if not, at least we can see it on the flesh, right?
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
thank you so much.
Yep.
All right. So, like I said, I didn't want to just grab everything that everybody has put in the internet already. Some excellent people have already put study guides out on the internet. I didn't want to just grab, copy, paste them, and make it into a presentation. So this is how I study. I read the books, but I also go and check what people have done as a study guide. So sadly, I couldn't get Vlad's permission. I think he's asleep, but he put it in the internet, so I'll try not to use it too much. I did get David Stammer's permission to use his VCP study guide as part of the vBrownbag, and we're also going to take a look at the PDF. So with that, let's go take a look at what we're doing today. All right, so we already talked about the VCP6 certification, what you may need to do, as always, come read if you're not sure. I'm going to close this one. Here we have Foundations exam, which was already covered in vBrownbag. It's around the same documents, and you're going to see that they're the same, like I already said, they're the same topics. We're going to close this one too, and we're going to focus on this one. So this is what we're going to do today. Objective 2.1 mostly talks about the distributed virtual switch. So let's talk about these the distributed virtual switch capabilities. And I'm going to go directly into David Stannon's blog, and we can go and check also what Vlad put in here. But this is one thing that you can talk and talk and talk. People can say, oh, you forgot this, you forgot that. There's a lot of good things on the distributed virtual switch. Let's put it this way. In the standard switch, VMware gave you something that they probably gave you maybe in 4.1 or 5.0, and they haven't touched it since. It's been the same feature. However, the distributed virtual switch, every time they got a release, they get new features on it. You actually can, and we're going to see this in the lab, you can select the version because every version is different of the distributed virtual switch. I would say that most of the development has gone this way. The kicker, or the sad part, is it's normally only available with something special. It doesn't come with bare vSphere. You have to have Enterprise Plus. You have to be a NSX customer. I think it comes with vSphere, etc. You have to have something special, but it's the way to go. It's beautiful. It gives you a bunch of stuff. So what exactly? Well, and this is actually, let's go and talk about this here. Distributed switch is the one, I would say, the intermediate step between vSphere and NSX, because you actually get a management plane and a data plane. Now, when we talked about a standard switch, the switch was defined at the host level. When you have a distributed switch, you actually define it in a vCenter, normally at the cluster level. I think only at the cluster level. I'm sorry, at the data center level. And you control all of these host proxy switches, which is basically what they're saying is there's a hidden simple switch, standard switch at the host that you can't configure directly. It can only be configured through vCenter. But that's basically what you have. You have a management plane. You create a switch at the vCenter level. This pushes the configuration to each host. And when you have a lot of hosts, that saves you a lot of time. Yes, if you don't have these capabilities and you want to make sure that you get your stuff done quickly, you basically have to script. You basically have to think outside the box, so you're not just pointing and clicking everywhere and trying to figure out if everything is the same. This solves that problem. Let's see what else we had here. So we get consistent virtual switch and core group configurations. This is the only switch in VMware that actually allows you to set up NetFlow. And basically NetFlow, if you have no idea what NetFlow is, it allows you to ship logs, just like, let's call it the syslog, the networking version of syslog. You can ship logs from the switch to a NetFlow collector, and you can display data in there. LACP support. This allows you to create, well, VMware calls when they have more than one uplink, they call them teams, but they're really just uplinks that can separate traffic. LACP actually lets you do what Cisco calls an ether channel, like it behaves as one interface.
Hey, Ariel,
VDS is the only one that will allow you. Go ahead.
We have one question from James.
Sure.
Yes, what happens to your VDS switches when vCenter is offline?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I mean it quite literally. You can't do anything to them. Since the only way you manage them is through vCenter, the switch is still in the host. It's still hidden. you can't really do anything to it. You can't manage it unless your vCenter comes back. I think I actually had a fun one. Let me see. I run the, of course, I'm not trying to make a plug here, but I started this little web page because I, from time to time, find something that was kind of hard to find. And I have a fun one here when we lost a vCenter. Here you go. So rejoining host to a vCenter with distributed switches and a gotcha for iSCSI. I mean, maybe I'll try to put this on Twitter. This is an example of what happens when, for some reason, you lost your vCenter. You know, oops. And then I have moved the host to another vCenter, and guess what? My hosts are using distributed switching. I can't manage them. So in effect, in essence, I would have had needed to bring my old vCenter back and restore it so that I could again manage them. Of course, that is if you want to keep your distributed vSwitches as they are. If you want to stop using them, well, you can just create a standard switch and you can start moving VMs, or you can, I think the last resort would be you would go into the host options and you tell it, you know what, restore my settings, blow up whatever you had there and just give me the default management switch, and I'll do whatever I have to do. So literally nothing happens when you lose your vCenter, but the problem is that you can't do anything else either. So
he had another follow-up.
I don't know if that satisfies your.
Yeah, he had a follow-up question to it, asking about can you power on a device if if vCenter's down on your distributed switches?
You probably know the answer already. I would say yes. You know why? Because this switch is basically, it has, you can configure it a bit, but it should still have its flexible things. So I would say yes. But this is VMware. You never know where these little things come up. If somebody else knows the answer definitively, please let us know. All right. And just a question for you, Jeff. I don't know where to see the questions from people in the interface.
Oh, don't worry about it. I'll keep an eye on them. There's actually a tab over here that says questions in the GoWebinar panel, and I'm just keeping an eye on them. So whenever they pop them up, I just stop you and just tell you what the question is. Just keep on focusing.
All right.
What you're doing. I'll keep an eye on it. No big deal.
Perfect. All right. So we were talking about one load balancing mechanism that is exclusive to the distributed virtual switch, and that is load balance. They call it LBT Load Balance. Load balancing based on physical NIC load. What this does is it only, I think it measures everything, but it can only basically take decisions on traffic that is outgoing from the switch. And it basically says, you know what? This VM is actually creating a lot of traffic. And it actually has an algorithm that takes it into account. I think it's over a certain amount of time. And it says, okay, you are probably going to cause contention. Let me move you over to another uplink. This is only available in the VDS. And for me, that is the #1 reason why I use it in production, because I want to make sure that whatever happens, my hosts are giving the best performance they can. So that's for me like the #1 reason to have this on. There's everything else is icing on the cake, but it is only available on the VDS. Network I/O control, only available on the VDS. You basically can say, I want to give this VM some preference. It's going to have a higher value in shares, much like you do with resource pools. I want to limit this VM, I don't know, this file server where we keep our anime. I don't want it to ever go over 10 megs. You can also do, I said limits, and in this version, and we're going to talk about it next week, we can also do reservations, guaranteeing that this VM will have that bandwidth. CDP, pretty sure CDP you can get it on the standard switch, but I think that LLDP, which is the not Cisco version, is actually supported on the VDS. You get ingress and egress traffic shaping, and I think the standard switch only does one of these. The distributed virtual switch does both. Route based on physical NIC load. I wonder if these are different. Health check. This is, you remember when we had the beacon option or the just link option on your switches? Health check is like the graduation of those checks. It actually can do more elaborate checks. You can export and restore your VDS configuration, something that is very useful when you are moving from one vCenter to another. In my opinion, and this is totally my opinion, if I have a new vCenter and I'm moving some hosts, I probably want to do everything from scratch. But if you have, if you know you're going to do some changes that you might want to restore, you might want to go back at some point in your life, or if you know that you're going to grab this and that, it's very nice to have that capability. You can do QoS, and one thing that a lot of people maybe don't realize is in these latest versions, the VDS can act like a firewall. You can put specific firewall rules on your VDS. Kind of makes you wonder why you're paying for NSX. Well, NSX is way cooler, right? It's the next level, but you can do a lot of that VM to VM firewall rules at the VDS level. And you also get, finally here, port blocking. Let me see if Adam put anything else here that was cool. Yeah, we should have talked about this. Private VLAN. Private VLAN is also, it's kind of like what you can do with NSX, but basically with private VLAN you can grab and create two other VLANs, well, a bunch of VLANs, but basically you can create two types. The first type that you're going to create is what's called a community, and in that community the hosts can actually, I think there's a graph here that we can see that. So, all right, so here's the graph that Lana had made, and he has an excellent post on private VLANs. This is even before the study guide. So in your communities, your VMs can communicate with other VMs in that community VLAN, and they can also communicate to what they call a promiscuous, but it's really the base VLAN. So let's start with defining those, right? So the primary and secondary. Your primary is actually your normal VLAN. Like if you are running your servers on VLAN 35, VLAN 35 is going to be your primary. You can create a VLAN that, two VLANs that do not exist, two types that do not exist on the physical switch, these secondary VLANs, and you can create a community one that can talk to VLAN 35, but you decided that, let's say this is the classic example, this is a classroom. I want this classroom to be able to talk to each other, but I don't want them to talk to the next classroom. So I create two community VLANs, and they can talk to each other. But both can communicate on this promiscuous or the base VLAN. The other type is isolated, and that means that whatever you put in there, even if you put 10 servers, they can't talk to each other. They can only talk back to the promiscuous VLAN. So this is a construct, a logical construct. I would say it's also one of those things that later on gets expanded with NSX. But basically, you are creating networking inside your hosts. I read somewhere I had read that if you want your, maybe here or no, I had read somewhere that if you actually need a switch that supports private VLANs, if you want to make sure that this actually can move from one host to another. So that's an interesting thing. I've never done it. If anybody knows about it, you're welcome to speak up, because I think that would be interesting to see, okay, which switches support this and how does it work?
Hey, Ariel,
Let's see what else.
Graham Mitchell just made a comment about private VLANs, and you don't have to do them inside your host. You can actually do them on uh, on actual switches too, right? So private VLANs. I know Graham made another comment about Cisco switches supporting it. You can absolutely do that stuff on there. Fairly certain that Juniper switches support that as well.
Right. And here's my what I always thought is private VLAN for me sounds great if you only have like one little host and you want to do some things. And this is where definitely the support from the switch is important. But you never have just one host. You want HA, you want DRS. So unless you're doing it on one host, make sure your switch supports it. Thank you, Graham.
Have you experienced using private VLAN? Have you found any use cases?
Sorry?
Have you found specifically have you found any use cases in like the VMware environment for private
No.
VLANs?
No. Most of the time, whenever we have actually the little things that we have actually decided that hey, we could do these things separate from the networking people, or it has really come as a product of discussing NSX with VMware trying to sell it to us. So before this, I'll be quite honest. A lot of people say, "Oh, that's cool," but they never implement it. There's not that much. People like those silos where, hey, I'm just a server guy. You want to talk to firewalls or something, talk to the firewall guys. So I think NSX is something that is breaking those silos a lot, but I really don't see it deployed. I don't really hear people talking about it all the time. It's always a topic for the exams, for definitely. But like you said, I don't know your experience, but my experience is that. Have you seen people deploying PVLAN around the world?
I've not been around the world or anything like that, but from my goings around and so forth, I've typically asked people if they've used private VLANs, and the list seems to be rather small.
Right.
They're a very niche type of use case.
Right.
So
and those are people that I think that when VMware came out with microsegmentation and NSX, they really jumped on it, right? Because they said, oh yeah, this is what I've been looking for.
Absolutely.
All right. One of the other things here, port state monitoring, very similar to how you do, or maybe this is not what I'm thinking. The one that I'm thinking is this one, port mirroring, which is very similar to how you do a span or an R span on a Cisco switch, where you can say, hey, I want to see all that traffic in this port because I want to put something here. So you can actually configure that in a VDS. And I wonder what this one is, port state monitoring. This feature allows each port to be monitored separate from other ports. See, Lemon has even more things that I don't know about. So these are all things, capabilities of the VDS. This actually doesn't come out as spelled in the guide. They talk to you about what it can do. They kind of tell you, oh, this is something, you can do some things, but there's no definitive list that I have found coming from VMware directly. And I think that these are probably your best chances, right? All right, so now we get to actually doing something, and this is we're going to create, delete a vSphere distributed switch. Nothing special here. Let's introduce my lab. So this was originally my VCAP studying lab, and actually, let me show you the other part. This is all running on one desktop. Everybody knows Nested ESXi, how it works. I have some hosts. I have a gateway address, AD controller. I think this is a Windows vCenter, and we're right now in this control center. And one important thing, if you have one of these, you can see that this is my desktop. It only has one NIC. Remember when you're setting up this networking, that if you want your machines to talk to each other, you really want to make sure that your promiscuous mode is set to accept, because otherwise the switch does its thing and it really doesn't let anybody else talk to each other. All right. So we have this our vCenter. We have a couple data centers, vBrownbag, Latin and US, and cluster some hosts. I think I put a little note somewhere saying what we have. Yeah, I think it's here. So most of these hosts have like 4 uplinks, and I just put maybe 1 gig or 2 gigs so we can tell them they're different, but it's just for kicks. Now, when you create a distributed virtual switch, you create them at the data center level. Actually, haven't even tried ever to do one here. I don't think it. Yeah, it doesn't allow you. It's a data center construct. I've seen some people that think that, well, let me just use a data center to separate my hosts like if they were a folder. Don't do that. It's really a very logical limit, a boundary. In this particular case, for the distributed virtual switch. So several ways to do it. If you haven't tried still to have your vSphere 6 lab environment, I do like the web client more than I used to. It's not perfect yet, but it is much more similar to what we're accustomed to in the C client. So if you right-click on a data center, you can see 2 options. You can create a new one. You can import one. In this case, we're going to create one. And we're going to call it VDS Jet.
Hey, Ariel, also, when you get finished up, Ankit made a comment in here to maybe possibly just kind of give us an overview of what your desktop configuration is, what you're running your lab on, just so for recording purposes.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, just a quick whenever you get done.
Sure. This is an i7. This is a gaming desktop that I had. It probably can't run any games anymore, but this is an Asus, I think, motherboard with an i7, which basically gives you like 4 cores with hyper-threading, so you get 8. I did fill it up to the maximum RAM that I could, so that was 32 gigs. I have an SSD in there. I connected a little NAS device that lately has been saving my butt. And I also have a normal HD in there. Let me show you that. So I actually have this one doing triple boot. If I let it boot, it goes into Fedora. If I stop the boot, I can go into Windows 7. And if I boot it off the USB, then I have my ESXi host. And everything is running on evaluation thing. So
very cool.
If it ever, yes, you could be a good boy and pay the advantage and get your own home licenses. But I honestly just rebuild it if I have to. The VMs still stay in the storage, so it's not that difficult to do it. And I don't think anything else. I mean, I think I did connect it with iSCSI to that NAS. I'm a big fan of OpenFiler for your home labs. You actually can go ahead and put it with 10 gig networking with VMXNet as the NICs, and you can enable NTU 9000 all the way through the switch and in the OS and stuff, and you could actually make it work like a real SAN. But today I'm actually running the, let me bring that guy over here. I'm actually running with 2 NFS data stores on this Windows host, which is super easy to put out there and really if it's just for a quick lab, that's probably the way to go with an NFS data store.
Very cool. Appreciate that.
And any other questions? If you need any help or advice, hit me up on Twitter. This is a topic that everybody loves talking about. How did you set your home lab? I'd love to give you any tips that I can. All right. So we were creating a new distributed switch, and here we have an important choice: versions. Why would you not choose the latest version? I can only think of one good reason. Your hosts have to be on that version for you to run that BDS version. So if you, let's say you did your vCenter 6 and you're ready to go, but oh God, I have like 200 hosts to update. Not my case, I only have like 30 or whatever. And they're still in 5.5 and I don't want to do it yet because one of these is not in the HCL yet. Let's put a case out there. Well, you can't really do a distributed switch version 6 if your hosts are running 5.5. You want to make sure that your stuff is level. So that for me would be the only reason to not choose the latest version. In our case tonight, in my lab, we are going to go with the latest version, and that's just because my hosts are that version. Now, an important decision. Remember, when you're doing a distributed virtual switch, you normally want to do something that is very uniform. You don't normally do a distributed virtual switch to just put it on 2 hosts and you have 15. This is something that you want to distribute among a bunch of your hosts. You want to have a big cluster, 5, 10 hosts, whatever. So right from the get-go, you have to think, okay, I'm going to put a distributed virtual switch and do this. So in this case, let's say we're going to create one for vMotion, and I'm going to do multi-NIC vMotion. And there's some ways that I can make sure that that traffic for vMotion actually goes through both ways, and I'm going to set MTU 9000. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be a perfectly performing vMotion. So you have to choose your uplinks. You have to choose whether you're going to enable or not network I/O control. We're going to see this the next time, but it's actually enabled in 2 places. You enable it here when you create the switch in the basic settings, and you also have to enable it later on in another place. And here it gives you the option, do I want to create a default port group? In this case, I think the second person that asked a question was, I can't remember the name. Could you help me with the name of the person that asked the second question? Herman?
It was
Herman.
ANKIT.
Well, yeah, let's just call it error. Sorry?
It was. I'm sure I'm probably pronouncing it. I've heard it pronounced Ankit, and I've heard it pronounced Ankit. ANKIT.
AMKIT? K? Ankit.
Yeah.
All right. Perfect.
Close enough.
So that's, yeah, sorry, like Jeff said, sorry we butchered your name, but I just like grabbing the names of the people that ask questions. So that's going to be our first port group. We haven't yet defined anything yet for that port group, but it's going to get created. So when you get your switch created, there's nothing on it yet. It got created in the vCenter, but it's not yet running on any hosts. So first thing you want to do when you actually click on this is you want to add some hosts. And you can do that, right click here, and getting started, you have this thing. You can do it in related objects. I think you can do it here or here. Yeah. So real easy to add a host, but maybe before you add it to a host, you want to go ahead and create another port group. Now let me see if I'm getting way too ahead of myself. If we're only looking at creating and distributing a distributed switch, add remove hosts, and then port groups. Okay, so we're going to do it in that order. So here we go. We have created our first distributed switch. If we want to delete it, guess what? Right click, delete. Real easy at this moment when you don't have anything tied to it. Really complicated later if you were for some reason to not have migrated all your VMs and not have removed the host and this and that. One word of advice, and this is, I know this is outside of the scope of VCP6, but I've had the best success with VDSs when I don't use them for VM kernel-based storage. So normally when I do my hosts, I will do all the vMotion, the management, everything on the VDS, but iSCSI settings, those are normally, I have to check each one of them. Each one has an IP. I want to make sure that they're bound to each interface and this and that. I normally keep those on a standard switch. It has another advantage. You can move a port, a standard VM or a VM kernel port, from a distributed to a standard switch back and forth, and basically nothing happens. You don't even, I don't think you even lose a ping. When your iSCSI IPs are bound to a NIC, you're going to get alarms all over the place. Now, I think I've done it once and nothing really happened, but it's one of those things where you're thinking, oh my God, am I going to lose all this storage in the middle of the day? Now, I'm not advocating you do changes in the middle of the day, of course, but you can probably save yourself that. Leave storage alone. Make use of the VDS for everything else. Storage has its own round robin. It's going to use those NICs. It probably, when you bind it, especially for iSCSI, it only uses one NIC anyways. You don't have to worry about all these advanced functions for your storage traffic. So that's just a parenthesis, sorry. All right, so I'm not going to delete it because it's just a waste of time, but let's go ahead and add a couple of hosts in here. You get a bunch of options when you do this. If your hosts had already a VM kernel or had VMs or had port groups, you can actually migrate stuff from one to the other as you're adding the hosts. But you also have the option, which is what we're going to do right now, of just adding the hosts. And I think that the only thing that really matters at this moment is making sure that you select the uplinks. So we're going to select, now notice I did have more hosts in here. I have 5, 6, 7, and 8. I can't add them because they have to be in the same data center. All right, these are not in a cluster right now. If you are adding a bunch of them, and maybe I can do this later, you can actually tell it, you know what, all my hosts are the same. I'm just going to tell you one, and you apply it to the rest. And this is template mode. It's really useful when you have to do a bunch of them. And it works well. It actually works very well. All right, so in this hosts, I basically don't have, and this is just a sample. This is not a real one. I actually only have my physical adapters and my management interface. These are new hosts. So I'm actually going to leave it there. I can or I can't. I can choose. Let's just go ahead and do the physical adapters first, because then we can talk about how to move those VM kernels. Now remember, all of these hosts have 4 uplinks. They're all on the same VLAN. So I know that even if I move my VM kernel, my management IP from one uplink to the other, I'm not going to lose it. Ideally,
hey Ariel, Graham's asking a question about the template mode.
Sure.
I'm gonna have to look this question up. Is template mode new in 6?
No, this was still in 5.5. I remember it clearly.
Okay.
Yep.
There you go, Graham.
Now, what we're going to do is we're going to create another one, and for that one, we're going to use template mode. All right, so in this one, we're only going to do manage physical adapters first. And what are we doing here in this interface? Well, we're going ahead and saying, hey, now you can select any of these. I'm going to actually select one, which is not the one that's in use right now, and say, okay, you are going to be my uplink 1. When you do it as template mode, it basically grabs and says, oh, okay, so VMNIC1 is going to be uplink 1 and applies it to everything. In this case, we're doing it very manually, right? So assign uplink. Okay. And I think I can actually do the, and I'm not going to do the other one. I'm going to use the migration for that one. But in this case, there's a very cool feature where it would impact, hey, are you going to blow up your iSCSI when you do this? In this case, we don't have iSCSI. It will always tell you no impact, but it can tell you, hey, you know, that interface that you're trying to move from one switch to the other is bound to an iSCSI interface. You're going to blow your storage, even if temporarily. So it's always nice to know and see green checks all around. So here we go, we're finished, we complete. I think we go to related objects, and we're going to see the host right here. Now, very easy. If we go and look at that host right now, we'll see that it actually belongs to 2 switches. So manager, monitor, related objects. I think it's manage. Oh, no wonder. I wasn't clicking on the green thing. All right. So right now you see we have 1 switch, which is a default switch with my 1 uplink. And now I have VBS, Jeff, that right now out of the 2 uplinks, I only have 1 defined. And I thought I had created an MKit. Let's take a look at that. I'm pretty sure I created a port group. Why is this port group not showing up on that host? I wonder. I would normally see that port group here, but oh, well, could it be? Assign port groups filter apply, showing 0 of 1. Overview. That is new. I hadn't seen that. So apparently, you can filter your assigned port groups view so that you can only see, I would guess, and this is from experience, you probably only want to see the port groups that actually have VMs on it. Well, here you go. You can actually tell it to hide some port groups for you. All right, so right now we have our VM kernel and this default VM network still on the 1 uplink. We have a distributed virtual switch. Jesus Christ, how do I take this off? And it has 1 uplink, but we're still using basically this. And maybe we could put a VM here and then separate stuff. But what happens if, let's say, we want to make sure that nothing remains here and we want to delete the switch? Okay, let's go back into our distributed virtual switch, and yes, go back to the add and manage hosts. And in here, we're going to say, I want to manage the host networking. Now, notice, before we could have done it all at the same time. I'm just taking it in 2 steps so you can see that it's just, you can take one big wizard, you can take smaller wizards, whichever you want. You could, this is the other option, you can add more hosts and manage the networking at the same time. You pick, it's all your stuff. So we're going to go ahead and work on these 2 hosts that we have. And we're going to manage physical adapters. We're going to move that uplink that we have. But since we're moving that uplink and that uplink has a VM kernel, we also have to move that IP, construct, that little thing inside the host that actually has our IP. So the first thing we do is, again, we assign an uplink. So this is going to be uplink 2. Notice that uplink 1 already had VMNIC 1. And you could just click out assign here, but only got 1 option left. So this means, as of this moment, our vSwitch 0 is not going to have any more uplinks. All right, here you go. It's telling you, hey, those IP addresses that you have in there, you're not going to be able to get them unless you migrate this thing. So where you do that, you click in this thing, you assign a port group, and we're going to assign it to MKit. Now, in this particular case, in my home lab, I don't have VLAN set up. When you do this in production, make sure that your port groups are the same VLAN. Make sure that you already set the VLAN information on the port group. We're going to take a look at that in a little bit before you do the migration. Otherwise, you're going to not succeed. Fear not. This thing has, I can't remember what it was called. It's like a fail-safe. It actually rolls back your changes within 5, 10, 20 seconds. If it detects that you messed it up, it actually say, you know what? No, you didn't do it right, and you lost connectivity, so the host roll back your changes. It's beautiful. I'm pretty sure whoever tried this in 4.1 or 5.0 and blew it up is now very happy that this feature is included by default, and you don't have to do anything to have that fail-safe.
I can tell you
Okay,
from experience, having done it in the 5.0 days, that it is significantly better in 6.0 migrating and actually having it migrate properly, or letting you know that you made a mistake. It's so much better now.
Totally agree. So again, remember, you want to make sure that your port group is a working port group. You might want to test it before you start moving your IP interfaces around. All right, so it's going from vSphere management network, that's the source port group, going to destination port group MKit, which we created inside of VDSGEF. Now, if you did everything right, you should have no impact. And actually, let's go ahead and have a, let's see if we lose a ping or not. Which one was it? 09? Okay, so let's have a ping over there. Click next. So we're gonna do, it gives you a little summary. Click finish. And then you get, I'm so happy that they put this back down there. I hate it when the tasks were down here. We're up here. So here you go. You did not lose a ping. You did not get even another millisecond. It just doesn't lose packets when it does this. So cool beans. We have our hosts. If we actually, I think we can go here and manage. You can actually see the ports on the distributed virtual switch, which is a big thing, right? It encompasses many hosts. And you can see that, hey, you know, this is a couple uplinks over here of EXXI 10. We have, what is this? I guess it, oh, it's a port group. There you go. So this is actually, I guess, this is our VM kernel. So it's taking a port in our switch, and we see the other uplinks down here. Let's go take a look at the hosts. So same view that we had before. As you can see, vSwitch 0 shows nothing. There's nothing left. And again, showing everything. Our VM kernel port is actually now on the VDSGEF, and if you click on this, you can actually, I think, you can see that it's actually going through these two. All right, but Ariel, I want to create another port group with a different VLAN. All right, again, this has to be done in the, no longer is it in the host view, you have to do this in the networking view of the vCenter. Come back here, you can click on getting started, you can click on, right click on the host, and create a new distributed port group. Now I know that the person that just asked the question, we have his name now, right? I forgot it again. Was it Herman? Not Herman. Something else.
It was Graham. Are you talking about asking about the template mode?
Graham.
Yeah, Graham.
Yes, Graham. Graham was my number 2. I'm going to start writing them down. So we're going to create a new port group called Graham. And this is very similar to what you had in the standard switch with some differences. I think this one does not appear in a default standard switch because this is important for NIOC, and NIOC is only in the VDS. One thing that I think this is part of a topic that we're going to cover later on. Let me take a look here. And of course, my desktop Already went to sleep. Let me log in. You know, it's already an hour, and I thought I would actually have enough time. One of the topics that we're going to cover is appropriate VLAN configuration. And this is a perfect place to talk about it because you get these options. So to understand, VLAN is a VLAN. It's, you know, a packet. It's a switch basically grabs packets and says, oh, I'm going to grab these little segments of these little bytes of the packet. And I'm going to tell you, oh, you're a certain VLAN and you can only talk to that VLAN. So you can define and separate, and put it into quotes because it's all using the same media, but it's logically separated by VLANs. So you can have, you know, 10 VLANs and they can't talk to each other unless there's routing involved.
Hey,
When you select VLAN trunking, you're actually,
just so you know, I have time. So if you want, you know, continue going, man. It just because we're at an hour doesn't mean you wouldn't be the first to run over. So go ahead and finish your topic, and we'll finish up whenever you're ready. As long as you don't have to leave, or I'm not going anywhere. So
I'm good. I have time.
Awesome.
I'm just worried that people will get bored.
Oh no, keep going.
Okay, VLAN trunking. What does that mean? Instead of the ESXi host grabbing the VLAN information, you know, and you probably have to go and read about this a bit, but it's the tagging, the VLAN tagging information, and saying, oh, okay, this packet goes to VLAN 60. I'm only going to give it to hosts connected on VLAN 60. It actually says, oh, I see that you have information for VLAN, but you want me to pass it over to the VM directly. That's fine. You go and do that. And that way you can actually have VLANs set up on the NICs of your servers. Not very common, but I have seen it. It's not unusual at all. This is how you would tell it, you know, don't strip that information. And if there's no VLAN information, you just select none. If you are going to set up private VLANs, which actually has to be set up for you in the switch first, and you can see here, if you select private VLAN without setting it up first, we're going to do this in a little while. This is where you would choose that. But for the moment, let's go ahead and do a VLAN, just to make it different. We could actually talk about policies, but policies I think is the 2.3 topic, so we won't talk about policies today. So here we go. We have created a new port group. It's going to show up here. It immediately, well, maybe you have to click on refresh here. It immediately gets loaded into your hosts. So this is the cool thing. You need to do a bunch of stuff? No worries. Once you change it once, it gets synced to everywhere else. All right. Let's see here. Creating and deleting a vSphere switch, add remove host, we already did that. Add configure remove. Guess what the remove is? Right click delete. You do want to make sure that before you remove, you don't have any VMs on it. So that's important. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to go back in here. It's going to be faster. If you take a look, we have some distributed switch here and another distributed switch here. And we actually have a VM running here. Well, let's see. Did I put it on the distributed virtual switch port group? Maybe it's faster through here. Yes, there is one port that is in the distributed port group called Walter. What happens if I try to delete Walter? It's probably going to tell me, oh, you shouldn't do that. Yeah, here you go. Resource 7 is in use. Gosh, what is resource 7? Well, you can actually go in here and look at the, actually I have to click on Walter, yeah. Related objects. Oh, maybe it's in the switch then. Team groups. Oh, that's not what I'm looking for. I thought it would be like, oh, this is the thing, but I can't tell if it's. No, it says a link up. Let's see. Can't tell if this is exactly that, but it could be. That number, I think, when it says resource 7, it tells you that port is in use. You can't delete this because you have something assigned to it. So, two easy ways of doing this. You can perfectly well come in here to the VM, and as long as you know what you're doing, hey, move it over to VM network, and that's it. You could also, and I think you can do it from here. You could also go ahead and run the wizard again and tell it you want to sit here, or is it not here? So I think it was 8. I have an error there. And in this wizard, you can actually tell it, I want to migrate virtual machine networking. So I'm not talking about the physical adapters. I'm not talking about the VM internal adapters. You know, we're not talking IPs here. I just want to move VMs from one place to another. It can be from a distributed switch, from the distributed switch to the standard, or vice versa. Okay, so here you go. This is our VM. And we want to do something here. It's in Walter. We can assign. We can move it to that one, I guess. I was expecting nation port group, deport group. Oh, you can only move it between things that are on the same uplink. Pardon me, that was my mistake. All right, so really, if you want to take that out of there, you want to move it to either another port group and delete it. Well, I could have done it anyways. Yeah, you can move it to another port group within the switch, and that way you can just go ahead and delete Walter. Let's go ahead and do it again. I'm sorry. I was thinking about moving it to a standard switch. So quickly here. Initial networking. Take about 8. Click. Clicky, clicky. Why are you not being nice? There we go. Okay, so we're going to move it from Walter to the other port group that we have on the distributed switch, which is the port group. Next, finish. That means that Walter, which had a VM, oh, look at that, in a complete operation, incurring notification by an operation. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I have something running on that switch, and I saw the alert, and I thought maybe I could get by with it. So let's just go ahead and move it manually on the VM, and that way we can delete that port. Edit settings. Of course, in here I'm just doing it very whatever it goes, but in a production environment, you really want to make sure that you're moving it to a port group that is valid, right? So go back to your port group, and I think it should allow us to delete now, unless the same error tells us it's in use. Yeah, sorry about that. So again, make sure your port groups, your distributed port groups, are completely empty before you try to delete them. Okay. We already did the uplink adapters. We already saw the static, dynamic, ephemeral, and honestly, I think that now, basically all that you see is static is by default. Dynamic, I don't see it anymore. I know there's a use case for this one. can't remember what it was. I think it was when you have a lot of machines and you don't want them to take a lot of machines that are turned off, and you don't want them taking resources on the host. Then you can select ephemeral. But normally you will just select static. It does get mentioned here, I think, as the probably not going to find it immediately, but it does get mentioned as the highest performance one because the host basically doesn't have to think before assigning this. But you already saw where this is. Okay, now we're going to talk about VM kernel adapters. Now, what's the difference here? Normally, when you did a VM kernel adapter, you did it in the host, right? You still do it on the host, even though it's a distributed virtual switch. Why? Because you're setting up an IP, and that IP is particular to the host. So even though this is a distributed switch, you are going to set up those VM kernels at the host level. So you can create a VM kernel adapter. You have to still tell it which one are you going to create this. We're going to create this in Graham. You can create a new switch, of course. Now, this is an interesting one. What if I put a new standard switch in here? Well, you basically just got out of the distributed switch. So if you want to create it in the distributed port group, make sure you select the port group of a distributed switch. Now, this is a very cool part of vSphere 6 is that you now have all these TCP IP stacks. These are the default. You can actually add more, but it's not part of this particular part of the blueprint. I really haven't seen where it is. I want to start testing this. I really want to go to VMworld and learn how this affects designs and stuff. But for tonight, we're not touching it. So we're just saying, okay, this is going to be my, I don't know, emotion traffic. And I don't know, it's going to give it 172.20.10.66. So you see, you still define the IPs, the VM kernels, at the host level. I wonder now that I have a VM kernel, does it show it by default? Yes, there you go. This is something that, sadly, you can't control from here. There are some other things that you could do. I think one of them is called a, let's say, related objects that you can say. There's one thing you can do that actually sets up like IP ranges that you can assign to your machines. I think it's network protocol profiles. We're going to see that next week, I think. So coming back, you have to do them at the host level. We've already seen migrating machines to from a distributed virtual switch. All right, we're now going to take a look at LACP. Actually, let me take a look here in Vladim's blog and see if we can see anything else that was worth mentioning. I see that
were you referring to IP pools?
Yes, they're not called IP pools, I think, in version 6 anymore. But it is, that's exactly the concept that I was saying. Okay. I don't know why it's refreshing kind of slow. I think we've done basically all of this. All right. Now, this is one of those things where they completely changed the, we were talking about VDS and this and that, and now we're going to go talk about LACP. So, if I'm not mistaken, you go into Manage Settings, LACP. Yeah, there we go. And I don't want to be, remember, I don't do this as every day as a job, but you're basically defining this is going to be my link aggregation group, LAG, and it's going to consist of this many uplinks. And I'm going to, the way I'm configuring it on the switch side, it's either active or passive, and I have a bunch of options for load balancing, which again I want to do on the next week when we actually can see it running. But creating one, real easy. You just tell it, oh, it's going to be this name, this number of ports, this configuration, and once you create it, refresh find out. Where did that go? Okay. I think then you can come in here, and it's not here, it's somewhere else. Where do I define which ports are those? Let me take a look at my cheat sheet over here. Migrating network traffic to LAV. Here you go. So it's in that same screen that we were in settings. If you click on this link up here, then you can start saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. So first thing, let's add some hosts. This is empty. I wonder why. I wonder why. We have to do this part first. Okay, security. Well, not that one. That's my management. I think I'm doing something wrong because normally I should be able to add the host, and those hosts do have available NICs that I could use for that. Pretty sure I still have 210 gig here. Well, sorry guys, let me go take a look here back. Yes, create it. Huh. Doesn't seem that it's part of the blueprint to actually add the ports, but I'm pretty sure I did it in my other, where did my lab go? Pretty sure I did it in the other one. Let me take a look here. Sit down here. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm drawing the blank here. If anybody knows it, let me know which one it is. But there has to be a way where you can add those ports and tell them it's this uplinks. Okay. Actually, let me go ahead and do it here. LEC support. Edit the link aggregation group. That's the name.
I can't remember it off the top of my head either.
Verify that for every host you want, a separate lab exists on the physical switch. Configure that with version 5. It's supported. I wonder if I had to. Maybe that's it. Maybe I had to. Oh, hold on.
We can table it and move on, and we can catch up. You know, we can catch up with it next week. That way, you maybe start it up next week. First thing, say, hey, you know, sure to give you a little time to kind of go figure it out.
Yeah. You're totally right. Let's not get cut off on that. All right. And I think that is about, nope. See, oh, we still have a way to go in here. Okay. Now, this one's I'm going to go really fast. You have the links. You're going to read them. Promiscuous mode. If you click accept, people in the same port group can talk to each other. MAC address changes. I remember one of these was on the inbound and the other one was on the outbound. So outbound frames and the forge transmits allow you to basically generate packets from a VM saying, I'm not this MAC address, I'm putting this other MAC address on the network, even though it's not mine. By default, it won't allow it. You can tell it to yes, go ahead. This one is the other way around. If for some reason the MAC address changes on the VM, it will actually still route those packets out to the VM when they are inbound. That helps. But just remember, this one's outbound, this one's inbound. DV port group blocking policies. You basically just can tell it to stop all traffic. And let me do that real quick. You can come in here. I think you can do it at both the distributed switch and port group settings. Edit settings. Nope, I lied. You cannot do it at the switch level. You can only do it at the port group level. So I can tell Graham, we have some kind of terrible occurrence in here. We're going to have to block all the traffic. Remember what it was, miscellaneous? Yes. When you do this, it really stops all traffic. I think there's some exam questions related to this. Like, they ask you to create something, but make sure that there's no traffic until it's enabled at a later date. Okay, you block the ports. All right. Now, load balancing and failover policies. You probably already studied IP hash. IP hash is the one that's actually used a lot with an LACP. MAC hash, this is normally one of the ones that you can select with any standard switch without any other requirements. Makes a hash on the MAC and decides it's going to use an uplink depending on that. This one says, oh, you're going to be port 7 on my virtual switch, then you're going to be forevermore on uplink 2. This one is an inflexible one. Weird that they didn't talk about load-based teaming in here, but okay. Now we're talking about, oh yeah, here it is. Okay, so explicit failover order. There's no load balancing algorithm going on. It's just, it goes through this NIC. If it doesn't work, we're going to go ahead and use another NIC. Route based on, this is the one that I had talked about already. It actually checks how much traffic is being used on the whole physical NIC. And if it detects that collision is going to happen and it can prevent it, it's going to move it. I think maybe one of these guys has the full, here we go. Glenn did put the full algorithm. So it calculates uplinks for virtual machines by taking their port ID and the number of uplinks in the NIC team. It tests the uplinks every 30 seconds. If their load exceeds 75% of usage, then, oh my God, where did the guy go? The virtual machine with the highest I/O is moved to a different uplink. I don't know that they're going to ask for this detail, but it's good to know. Okay, now we're going to talk about VLAN and private VLAN. Now, I had explained before, you actually have to enable this. I can't remember if it was settings first or here first. Yeah, okay, so it's not in settings, it's in edit private VLAN, and this is where you define them. You tell them, okay, my promiscuous one, my primary VLAN ID, I think we had said it was 10 or whatever, but 15 here. This is what really communicates outside your host, and this is what you normally want all your private VLANs to be able to talk to. Then you add a community. You can tell it, okay, you're going to be 51. You can add more communities if you want to, or you can go ahead and select isolated. Now remember, isolated doesn't let you talk to anything ever. Ah, this shouldn't, normally you don't get to create more than one isolated private VLAN. So I'm actually surprised that it let me do it. I'm actually going to click OK and see if it actually lets me go in here. Let's see, 52. Because normally you only need one isolated VLAN. So this might be a change. There you go. Private VLAN configuration is not correct. You only get one isolated. It can't talk to anything. You don't need more than one. But you can have more than one community. So once you have created your private VLAN, they appear here. And now when you create, this is just a setup of private VLAN. Then you have to come in and say, okay, I want to create a new core group. It's going to be called, my cat is called Neko, so it's going to be called Neko. And when we select the VLAN, we now can select the private VLAN. So not complicated. It's actually, the only gotcha related to this is when you actually have an exam like the VCP6-DCV, where you actually have to create them. If you haven't done this before, you might forget that you have to do a setup first and then come here. So that's how you create those. Let's go back here. Okay, we already talked about none, VLAN, VLAN trunking, private VLAN. Now we can talk about traffic shaping policies. All right, traffic shaping. Sounds like QoS. We're basically grabbing and saying, I want to modify the way that this traffic behaves. So what can you do? You can modify on average bandwidth, on peak bandwidth, or in burst size. People that are familiar with networking, that have had to do this, QoS and switches, this is normally what you're looking for. Am I looking for people that are bursty? Am I looking for people that cause a spike? Am I looking for people that just consume a bunch of bandwidth? So you get to choose settings, and note, it's in bits, not bytes. So you get to choose settings. Let me go back in here to a port group. Oh, come on. If we go and talk to Neko, and I want to talk to you and talk about your settings, we can talk traffic shaping, and we can say, hey, for, let's say, egress, your peak bandwidth is actually going to be, this is K bits. So let's say I just want to give you a meg. 1,000 K bits is a meg. Let's say you put the average to the same, I don't know, whatever you want to do. But you can basically say, okay, anything that we join in here, this is how we're basically, in this case, limiting the traffic on this machine. We're getting closer. I can feel it. We already talked about most things. All right, TCP segmentation offload. What is this? TOE. People have heard the term. It's actually, best place or the simplest place where I saw it explained was in here. I think it was right in the, see here. It basically explains that the OS may move a bunch of data bigger than the MTU size. It thinks it can transmit it because the NIC is telling it it can. Who was that? I remember seeing that here. And let me just search. VCP. Yeah, rate search and offload. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so here we go. When TSO is enabled, the network adapter divides larger data chunks into TCP segments. And it does it instead of the CPU doing it. it's actually offloaded to the NIC. So you're going to see this in the attached materials. When you use TCO, well, we call it TSO, you get lower CPU usage in your machines. However, this is something that you set up on your VMs. Let me go see if I have a VM here. If not, we can do it on this one. These are Intels. This won't work. This one off. Yeah, we're gonna have to turn one on. Oh, I think my domain controller actually has one of those. Let's go bring the domain controller. Okay, it has to be on a VMX-Net 3 adapter. Such as this one. Actually, let's go ahead and open both of them. But you're going to see that the feature set on the VMX-Net 3 is much more robust, let's say that way. So you have some offloads here, right? Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. On the VMX-Net adapter, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Where's the other one? 7, 8, 9, 10 options that can actually do offload off the CPU. So this is why they tell you, use the VMX-Net 3 adapter whenever you can, because it's been optimized. It will help your machines run better. Sorry about that. No worries. Okay, now there are some other things that you have to know. Actually, didn't know this command. It's the first time I see it. I'm sorry about that. I thought it was just the VM kernel. I'm sorry, the VMX-Net 3 configuration. Oh, there you go. It's enabled by default. No wonder I never had to play with it. But apparently you can disable it if you want to. Cool. And the last thing today, because we already talked about the VLAN configuration, we're going to talk a little bit about jumbo frames. So jumbo frames, two biggest use scenarios. Jumbo frame is any packet that is bigger over MTU 1500. If it's 1600, like you will have in NSX, that's a jumbo frame. If it's 9000, like you normally see in storage, either for iSCSI, I think they also recommend it for NFS, that's a jumbo packet as well. The important thing to remember, and I don't know if they put it around here, it has to be end-to-end. What does that mean? The interface on your host, the VM kernel, you have to tell it that the MTU is this amount. The switch, the virtual switch, in this case a virtual port group, has to know that it has a different MTU amount, a jumbo frame one. Whatever you're connecting physically in the world, if you have a Brocade switch for your iSCSI, it has to be set up for jumbo frames. The storage processors, the actual NICs on your SAN, they also have the setting, and you also have to set it up there. So we're going to just look at it where it's configured, but just remember, you have to set it up everywhere. And what happens if you want to test it? There's actually, and sorry, because I've done this in the real world, but VMK, I think VMK ping, you can actually tell it size and interface. Yeah, here you go. So see this one? It's actually that command. When you do a VMK ping with the S and D options, you can actually tell it, I want you to send a VMK, a ping from a VM kernel using this size of a packet. And if you get a successful ping, stuff is configured correctly. If it's not, it's going to fail, period. Now you don't put 9,000, and I remember when we were doing this with the compelling array, I only put like 5,000 or something because the brocade switches that we were using had an interconnect that reduced the size and this and that. But anyways, I just needed it to make sure that it was more than 1,500, so I put 5,000, and 5,000 worked great for those tests. So one little thing from a person that has actually suffered with MTU in the real world, there's a command where you can test it. Now let's go back here. Let's go take a look at where this is set up. And I don't know it by heart, but I'm pretty sure it's either here. Maybe not here. I don't think it's set up here. Yep, there it is. So let's say you set it up 9,000 here. Then you come down to the switch level. I think you also set it up at the distributed port group level. Don't quote me on that. General, advanced. Nope, 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 nope. There it was. But you still have to select the uplinks. Monitoring traffic. Okay. So it's not there. Once you set up on the distributed virtual switch, we're actually going to go and take a look at those IPs that we set up. Oh my God, a host went down. What the hell? So take a look in here at my host. Manage the kernel adapters. Take a look at RAM over here. And you can actually see it probably here in the properties. IP settings, policies, all. You can see here that it has an MTU setting. You will have to change that MTU setting to match here in the next setting. So we would set 9,000 here as well. So just remember, it has to go from end to end, and you can test it to make sure it's working.
Hey, Ariel,
And with that,
Ankit has a question here. I'm going to unmute him for just a second.
go for it.
Go ahead, Ankit.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, how are you?
Okay, I'm fine. Hey, I just wanted to emphasize the importance on end-to-end jumbo frame enable or disable. We get a lot of questions on, performance and, latency issues. So which comes down to a jumbo frame. So just wanted to share the experience with the fellow brown baggers that, it is really important that you set up the jumbo frames on end-to-end, which involves your ESXi host, shared storage, and the switches. So every component needs to be compatible if you enable the jumbo frames. If not, it is always advisable that you disable the jumbo frame. That's all.
Yes. No, and that's perfectly fine. And I'll tell you my experience. I was setting up a new compelling SAN, and we're using iSCSI. And, the IPs were fine. I was, once it was set up, it would take a long time scanning, and it just didn't work as it should work. I mean, it kind of worked, but it just wasn't snappy, and it was failing, and you had all these little problems, like it comes and goes, and it just didn't work fine, right? And in the end, what it was just a mismatch, and actually it wasn't even my fault. It wasn't something I controlled. My VM kernel interfaces, my switches, they all had the jumbo frame setting. It was actually the interconnect in the brocade switching that didn't have that MTU. So, like Ankit said, it's really important. Make sure everything is set up. And this is why I especially brought up the VMK ping command with the options, so you can test it. Normally people just say, yeah, I put it everywhere. But how do I test it? You go ahead and you log into that host and you run those commands, and you make sure you can ping your SAN with those jumbo frames.
Cool.
Right, well, the last thing that we have for today, thankfully, I'm sorry it took so long. Thank God we're splitting this in two. We're just talking about, again, a little thing. I just wanted to emphasize that some people, and in some places you can see this called external switch tagging, which means that the host doesn't see the tagging on the packet. It's what's normally called an access port. So I just wanted to emphasize, if you see external switch tagging, that just means there's no VLAN information. It's just you got whatever is on that port. All right. So that's it for tonight. Hopefully I didn't bore everybody, and it's and you still got something out of it. If for any reason anything in this wasn't clear, let me know through Twitter, or let the vBrownbaggers know, and I'll clear it up more in the next session. But hopefully everybody studying and watching this at home, that couldn't make a question, remember Twitter. Twitter is an excellent thing for everybody that's in VMware. You really want to get on Twitter, follow the authors of your books you're reading, find out who the experts on anything are and follow them, and that way you can always ask. People normally won't ignore you. So thank you very much, Jeff, for hanging out with me. I think you can close it now.
Appreciate you coming on and talking, man. Good stuff.